Okay, we'll start with this. A recap of last night's ladies' fight card by way of UFC Fight Pass via Lou DiBella Entertainment. On the card, you saw Melissa St. Ville versus Olivia Gerula. Melissa St. Ville, who in so many words outclassed Olivia Gerula. This is Melissa St. Ville's third consecutive victory since rebounding off the loss in Belgium to Delphine Persoon back in 2019. She initially rebounded with a win over Diana Santana, a win over Jessica Camara, who was in action on this same card last night, and last night she took on journeywoman Olivia Gerula. Wasn't hard to see that Melissa was winning this fight. Showed the cleaner, tidier work, punches that you don't have to look too hard to see, better movement, better in really every department. This was an 8-rounder in the lightweight division. That's 135 pounds, where Katie Taylor holds all the alphabet titles, is the undisputed champion. You do get the sense that anybody who's campaigning at this weight is attempting to make their way towards a Katie Taylor fight.
And they'd have to be.
Katie Taylor is the biggest name in women's boxing. It's the biggest payday anywhere at or around these weights, and anyone campaigning in the same division as Katie, in all likelihood, is trying to position themselves for a world title shot, a world title opportunity. Melissa adds another W to the column, and she still got it. You wonder who's next for Melissa St. Ville as she continues in her professional career, a career that's seen her lock horns with anyone from Jennifer Hahn to Eva Wahlstrom to Delphine Persoon to Jessica Camara.
A victory that's aged well.
We'll talk about shortly, and her lightweight contest with Heather Hardy.
A performance.
Just back to Melissa. She still got it at 37 years old. She's still adding wins to the column. So we'll see what's next for her. Makia Krebs, unbeaten up-and-comer Makia Krebs, who we've talked about here on the channel. She was supposed to make an appearance on the card, but the story is she was 7 pounds overweight. 7 pounds over the contracted limit of what was supposed to be her fight. Her fight that would have been her debut under the Lou DiBella Entertainment banner. That's right. Earlier this month, Makia Krebs inked a promotional deal with Lou DiBella, and this was going to be her first fight under the banner.
She blew the fucking weight.
And, you know, Makia Krebs, she debuted as a bantamweight. That's 118 pounds. The story is that Makia was about 7 pounds over the limit, so if we're talking about what was supposed to be a bantamweight contest, that Makia was 7 pounds over the contracted weight for, that's essentially saying that Makia came in as a featherweight for what might have been a bantamweight contest.
Really not sure what went wrong there.
You hear about fighters blowing weight. Fighters miss weight all the time, though not by this much, not by 7 pounds. You have to wonder if any attempt was made at all to make the contracted weight for the contest, because 7 pounds at or around bantamweight, a super bantamweight, a featherweight, well, that might be a whole nother weight class or a whole nother 2 weight classes. The difference between a bantamweight and a super bantamweight is a matter of, 4 pounds? 4 pounds and you're in a different weight class. 7 pounds.
You're in 2 different fucking weight classes.
You really have to wonder what might have prevented Makia Krebs from making the contracted weight for the contest if she made any attempt at all, because she missed it, yeah, but she missed it by a lot. She missed it by a mile. You hear about fighters missing weight all the time. Oftentimes, it's only about a pound, maybe 2, but 7?
She's young. She's only 24 years old.
We're not talking about some battered old battle axe with slow metabolism here.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, man.
They'll just have to reschedule Makia a fight, and that fight, whenever it takes place, will be her promotional debut under the banner. We then come to the main event of this evening. The fight between Canada's own Jessica Camara and Brooklyn's own Heather Hardy. And, Heather, she started off the fight strong. She managed to score a knockdown. What could have been ruled a slip, but was ruled a knockdown in the first round. There were certain realities ahead of this fight that had to be addressed. That Heather Hardy hadn't fought in well over a year. She was coming right off that loss to Amanda Serrano in September of 2019. It had been well over a year, closer to 2 years, since Heather saw any action. Jessica Camara, when it comes to Jessica Camara, something very similar applied, that Jessica was coming off that loss to Melissa St. Ville the year before. Jessica hadn't seen action in over a year either, with the difference being that Jessica's younger than Heather by about 5 or 6 years. Heather's pushing 40. A veteran of 25 fights now, with last night's fight, who debuted in 2012. A veteran who saw no action in the year of 2020.
An aging fighter.
Ahead of this fight, I felt like perhaps Heather Hardy might win it on volume and activity and toughness, because comparatively, Heather Hardy approached this fight with a lot more pro experience than Jessica Camara. You know, Jessica, ahead of this fight, she only had something like, 8 or 9 fights? Whereas Heather, obviously the more experienced fighter in the fight, she had 24 professional bouts, 24 professional contests. Comparatively, Heather's been in there with the better fighters so far. 2 fights with Shelly Vincent. The Amanda Serrano fight in the featherweight division. There was a feeling that on paper, Heather Hardy would be the logical choice, but as we all know, what's on paper doesn't always tell the story, the full story. That, Jessica, Heather, they've both had stints of inactivity recently. They were both coming off of losses ahead of this match, but the difference between them is that Heather was 6 years Jessica's senior. Those 39-year-old legs, those 39-year-old reflexes, how are they going to hold up against a naturally bigger girl? A girl who's a natural lightweight. Heather Hardy moved up to the lightweight division for this contest, and the reason was that she couldn't make featherweight anymore. This is an aging fighter whose metabolism is slowing down. Signs of Father Time catching up to the fighter, because Father Time catches up to everyone.
Me and you included.
That inactivity didn't help it none. The fact that Heather's not only an aging fighter, but she's been an inactive fighter in the last 12 months, well over 12 months. There are other fighters in Heather's age bracket that have stayed competitive. Fighters like, Argentinia's Marcelo Acuna, Mexico's own Bobby Juarez, who's going to attempt to rebound off the loss to Yulihan Luna very soon against Candy Sandoval. Means staying busy, it helps. Not allowing ring rust to collect. And Heather looked rusty. Slow, ineffective arm punches, dragging those feet, those 39-year-old legs. Heather's never been a defensive wizard. Defense has never been Heather's bread and butter. So a trademark of a Heather Hardy fight is Heather's going to take shots. And she can take the shots because she's got a world-class chin. I think she put that on display yesterday, the same way she did against Amanda Serrano over a year ago. And there's a moral victory in there for Heather, that she finished the fight on her feet where she looked well on her way to being stopped. Being stopped for the first time in her pro career by Jessica Camara, who looked sharp, was getting off good straight punches,
Good hooks,
good movement, and was just the better overall fighter on the night. There's no easy way to say this. There was talk of Heather using this fight and how she would perform in the fight, ahead of the fight, as the gauge for whether or not she wanted to continue, whether or not she wanted to go on, or, does she want to retire? And having seen how she looked, I honestly believe Heather should retire. The super featherweight division, 130 pounds, is far too competitive for Heather at this time. This fight took place at 135 pounds, the lightweight division. There are a lot of other girls out there to worry about between 130 and 135 than Jessica Camara, who's not the biggest puncher, good boxer, polished, solid.
Yeah.
But not the biggest threat to a super featherweight or a lightweight. Not the biggest threat to anyone campaigning at or around these weights. If you can't make it past Jessica Camara, how are you going to make it past some of the other killers that are out there? The bigger punches. Listen, I can only tell you what I think. And if you want to know what I think, and you're here, so I'll assume that you do, I think Heather Hardy needs to pack it up. I think she needs to retire. And if she does, by the time that this video is uploaded, I think she will have made the right decision. It's a pity that Heather Hardy could retire at this time when women's boxing is experiencing a global renaissance. It really is a pity, but for her health and her well-being, that's the only decision to make as far as I'm concerned. Heather needs to retire. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, it appears that Daniel Dubois reportedly will be working with Shane McGuigan as his new trainer after parting from Mark Tibbs before having their first fight together. Dubois is set to face Bogdan Dinu on June 5th. And June 5th, that's right around the corner. This news is a little bit hard to interpret, and for me it's hard to interpret because I actually have a very high opinion of Shane McGuigan. I think he's one of the better underrated trainers in the United Kingdom, certainly one of the better young trainers in the United Kingdom. And I think it is promising that Daniel Dubois could be training under the watchful eye and tutelage of Shane. That bit of it seems like good news to me, but what's not encouraging is that Daniel Dubois will be breaking in yet another new trainer before he actually has his next fight, before he actually rebounds off the loss to Joe Joyce. I mean, what could have happened between Daniel Dubois and Mark Tibbs that they've decided to part ways before they even have a fight together? That bit of it is not encouraging. You know, you don't want to fight a bouncing around from trainer to trainer to trainer because it'll take that much longer for you to get a finished product. It'll take you that much longer to get a fully rounded out and fluid fighter. Here and now, I don't know what the situation was. I don't know what the gory details are as far as why Daniel Dubois won't be working with Mark Tibbs moving forward. If I'm being honest, that was a partnership that I was actually excited about. I was excited to see what kind of Daniel Dubois can we get with Mark Tibbs in his corner. Mark Tibbs, who helped Dillian White become the fighter that he's become.
What can Mark do for Daniel?
It's not that Shane McGuigan isn't an excellent choice. He is an excellent choice. It is encouraging to have Shane McGuigan in Daniel Dubois' corner, but there's a lot that needs to be reconciled there. The saving grace is that Daniel Dubois is still young enough that there's plenty of time to iron out the kinks. There's plenty of time to iron out the problem areas fight by fight. And that even though these changes do denote some form of instability, I don't know what the fuck happened, Daniel's got time. Daniel's got time because he's a young guy in his early 20s.
I'm curious as to whose decision this was.
Because you don't often see something like this. You don't often see a guy enter into a partnership with a trainer and having that partnership end before the trainer and the fighter have even had a chance to have a fight together. So I am curious about that, though.
Who really fucking knows?
Seems like Mark's having a run of bad luck. We know that Mark Tibbs very recently worked the corner of Billy Joe Saunders. Billy Joe Saunders, who got his eye smashed in by Canelo Alvarez and retired in his corner. So many words, he quit. You wonder that situation might not have something to do with this situation and who made this decision. Did the Daniel Dubois people decide to go with Shane McGuigan as opposed to Mark Tibbs because they didn't want to end up like Billy Joe Saunders because they're recovering from an eye injury?
They don't want to have to deal with another one.
Did Billy Joe Saunders getting his eye caved in, his orbital bone broken, what's supposed to be a quadrupod fracture, did that have anything to do with the decision-making process from the Daniel Dubois people? Was this a decision they made, and was this decision made based on Billy getting his eye smashed in? Because we all know Daniel Dubois just got his eye smashed in by Joe Joyce. Did this influence them in any way? Mark Tibbs working the corner of Billy Joe Saunders, who just got his eye caved in. You have to wonder. Wouldn't surprise me if it did. Related news, per tweet from Mark Ortega. So the rumor is that Saunders trainer Mark Tibbs said in various interviews that Saunders didn't give the needed response to continue. And those videos have been taken down by media outlets at the behest of MTK. That's boxing for you. We all know how sweet Billy Joe Saunders is on Daniel Kinahan. Daniel Kinahan, who's believed to still be in business with MTK Global.
It's the rumor.
I believe that MTK denied Daniel's continued involvement in the company, continued involvement in boxing. I mean, there was a news story last year that Daniel was walking away from boxing because of all the bad press he was receiving, the infamy of being the alleged leader of a massive cartel that originated in Ireland. And when that news broke, Billy Joe Saunders released a statement indicating that he might walk away from the sport of boxing on that premise. If his old buddy Daniel Kinahan is leaving the sport, he might leave with him. This was all last year, in case you guys forgot. Listen, wouldn't surprise me at all if this media blackout that we're seeing, and rest assured, it is a media blackout.
Those videos of Mark Tibbs have been taken down.
Those interviews that were conducted post-fight where it was Mark Tibbs himself indicating that Billy Joe Saunders did not give Mark the desired response for the contest to go on. And you know, it sounds like what it sounds like. It sounds like Mark was just trying to find a fancy way of saying that Billy Joe Saunders quit. And it's the weirdest thing because as far as I'm concerned, Billy Joe Saunders quitting isn't the focal point for me. I mean, I'm not the one getting punched in the face. I'm not the one getting my orbital bone smashed in. If Billy Joe Saunders felt like he couldn't go on, then he shouldn't have went on because we see where things were going. So that's not even the issue for me. Billy Joe Saunders quitting, as far as I'm concerned, That's not a big deal. The big deal is that Billy Joe Saunders got a taste of his own medicine, and he got a taste of his own medicine in front of 73,000 boxing fans. Billy Joe Saunders was very quick to criticize Daniel Dubois for making the decision that he'd had enough and he couldn't go on in the Joe Joyce fight.
Talking shit.
He's very quick to criticize Daniel Dubois, and as fate would have it, perhaps it was kismet.
Chickens came home to roost, man.
Billy Joe Saunders found himself in the exact same kind of situation that Daniel Dubois found himself in, and Billy Joe Saunders didn't react any differently than Daniel did.
That's what the fuck you get for talking shit.
I mean, that's why I don't feel bad for the guy. Why would I feel bad for Billy Joe Saunders getting his orbital bone smashed in when Billy Joe Saunders himself did not feel bad for Daniel Dubois, his countryman, his contemporary? Billy Joe Saunders' knee-jerk reaction to Daniel Dubois deciding not to go on was also the same kinds of reactions that he's getting right now. If you didn't feel bad for Daniel, don't expect people to feel bad for you. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. Me not feeling bad for Billy Joe Saunders, that ain't the worst of it. You want to see the worst of it, you should see what the boxers themselves have to say about it. You should see what retired former world champion Fernando Vargas had to say about it. He said Billy Joe Saunders quit. He said Billy Joe Saunders is a bitch. You should see what Ishii Smith had to say about it. You should see what Antonio Tarver, several others, had to say about it if you want to see the harsh criticisms. I'm just giving it to you straight. It's the only way I know how to give to you. Billy Joe Saunders got a taste of his own medicine, and nobody likes that. Because of that, I don't feel bad for that guy. Though who could stage a media blackout of Mark Tibbs' own words post-fight?
Who would have the power to pull off something like that?
To get channels, YouTube channels, prominent channels that conduct interviews to pull their own interviews. What is their bread and butter?
Who'd have the power to pull off something like that?
IFL TV's in bed with MTK Global. That's no secret. If there is a secret, it's whether or not Daniel Kinahan is still in bed with MTK.
Some people still think he is.
And in light of this, I can't say they blame them.